everybody. Welcome to Occupational Therapy 226. Today's lecture is a little short one on an overview of activities of daily living in pediatrics. And I believe we'll also throw in some IADLs just for good measure. Let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and I'm Melisa Kaye, in case you forgot. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Our objectives, to identify the basic expectations for ADLs and IADLs, to understand the social and cultural influences of ADLs, IADLs on skill development, and to explain how to design an intervention that fosters ADLs or IADLs. This slide deck is got some progressions, and I'm not going to go through every bit of it, but I am going to just kind of describe some of the areas that we look at in pediatric OT and what we're looking for. So in terms of dressing, at a year, a child is going to cooperate with dressing. At 2, they're going to take their clothes off generally. At 3, they're going to put them on. At 4, they're going to start using fasteners and mastering them. And they unfasten before fastening. And then at 6, they're going to shoe tie. So that's a general progression. This is kind of a cool photo. It's from the Washington Post, and it's about a Kohl's, Penny's, and Target developing some adaptive clothing so that all kids can access their clothes and become independent in dressing. So I just thought it was a cool addition about dressing. All right, we have the same progression with toileting skills, right? So another big central ADL for children. First, they get bowel and bladder regularity, bladder first. Then toileting prompts are given on basically a pattern, right? So you know how often your child goes, you start prompting them. Then you develop, a child develops a sensory appreciation of urgency for bladder emptying. And this is the interoception system. Then they request to use the bathroom. Similar progression for bowel, but it happens later than bladder. And average toilet training age is 27 months. Now, this is based on Western standards, so not everywhere in the world is 27 months, and not all cultures follow that progression. So take that into consideration with your clients. Toilet training is not dependent on a child's mobility or their ability to manage their clothes, but these factors can influence how independent they can become, right? So clothing management, different than toileting, but figures in there. Here's a couple examples of adaptive toileting equipment. And now I want to introduce you to two kind of cool strategies. The strategy is called chaining, and there's backwards and forwards. So backwards chaining. Backwards chaining, say a task has 5 steps. With backwards chaining, the OT completes steps 1 through 4, and the child does the 5th step, right, until they master it. Then the therapist does steps 1 through 3, child does 4 and 5, etc. Contrast that with forward chaining, right? So forward chaining, as you can imagine, is just the opposite. Task, 5 steps, the child completes step 1. Therapist steps 2 through 5. Then the therapist trains the child to complete steps 1 and 2. The therapist does 3 through 5, etc., until each step is mastered, and then they're linked together. Great example of this is shoe tying, right? So shoe tying has a lot of discrete steps. I've taught it both ways. One is the child takes the 2 laces, crosses them, and makes that first half knot, right? So that's step 1. I do steps 2 through 5, or however many there are. The other way is I do all the steps right up till I wrap the bow, and I have the two little loops, and the child takes those loops and tightens them, and now their shoes are tied. The question you might be thinking is, how do you decide which one to use, forward or backwards? Some of it is the task, like completing shoe tying is pretty awesome, right? And so maybe we want to do backwards chaining. The other piece is what kind of persistence and motivation does the child have, and other factors around how easily they learn and which steps might be the easiest and hardest. Anyway, forward and backward chaining, both great techniques for your toolbox. All right, then we talk about establishing meaningful goals for ADLs and IADLs. So we want to make sure that they are developmentally appropriate, not just chronologically appropriate, right? So some of our kids are not going to act like their chronological age, especially a child potentially who has an intellectual disability, right? So they're not going to act like they're 11 years old. They might act like they're 8 or 7, right? We also want to establish culturally relevant goals. So taking the IADL of babysitting, right, which is kind of a first almost work activity, but definitely childcare is an IADL. When's it acceptable to have an older sibling babysit? Is that a thing? What about different genders? Do boys babysit and girls babysit and non-gender conforming people babysit, or is it just one way? Like, how does it work? Also, what are the expectations as kids grow for male and female and non-gender conforming folks? And sorry, I didn't have that in the on the slide. I will add that. So that's just a couple little examples of how culture can impact development. The other pieces are, at what age is dependence, interdependence, and independence in ADLs and IADLs expected and desired, right? So just because in the West we're like, let's go, 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 right? Got to get those kids independent, doesn't mean that it's the same the world over. And for us to think that is super self-centered and Western centric, and doesn't make sense, especially since we live in such a multicultural area and world. So things to consider. All right, stepping down off of that topic and soapbox to cover our last point, which is including environmental supports for task accomplishment. So what kind of equipment might we need to make ADLs and IADLs a functional activity for the child, and what level of assist is necessary? Moving on to IADLs, we look at daily living and community participation. The individualized transition plan, which happens when it starts happening when a young person is about 14, goes into place at 16 years old, and is called an ITP for short. It goes into that document for sure, but there's IADLs that younger kids participate in and can become independent with. So 2 to 3, helping to clean up, especially toys. 5, a variety of things, making the bed, taking out the trash, etc. 7 to 9, cooking cold foods. 10 to 12, cooking hot meals. And 13 to 14, doing laundry. So again, this progression of skills. If you want additional review of some of these developmental progressions, you can look in OT 212. There's infant and toddler, preschool, and middle childhood presentations, and I've linked my videos for those presentations in the presenter notes for your convenience, and they're all on YouTube as well. All right, so here's the question that students often ask me. How much detail do I need to know, and how do I study this? So here's my thoughts. Focus more on the progression of skills, like the logical part, more than just memorizing a list, right? So you have your ages, you have your progressions, and think about how they go together, right? Like which is the hardest task, which is the easiest task. Also think about your development, that of your family or friends, your kids, kids that you babysat, and use this to get a picture in your head of ADL and IADL progression. So it's not something out there, it becomes something that is in here. Also manipulate the information. So rewrite it. Like, don't just read it over. That's a terrible way to memorize stuff. I read it and I'm like, ah. So rewrite it. Put it in a chart or table, or make a map of it, make flashcards, talk about it. That's a great way too, right? The more you manipulate the information, the more memorable it will be. And finally, just be prepared to memorize some of it, okay, at the end of the day. All right, that's it. I'm going to change those slides just a little bit. I'll post them online for you. If you have any questions at all, please jot them down. You can email me. You can bring them to class, and I will be happy to discuss. Thanks very much for your attention. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.